Welcome to History Recapped, where we explore the greatest moments in human history. Today we embark on a journey that changed the course of civilization, an age of adventure, ambition and discovery that reshaped the world forever. This is the story of the Age of Discovery, the daring voyages of Columbus, Magellan, and the European explorers who charted new oceans, found new continents, and ignited the global age we live in today. Our story begins in Europe in the late 15th century, a continent emerging from the shadows of the Middle Ages. Kingdoms like Spain and Portugal were consolidating their power, fueled by trade, religion, and ambition. To the east lay the riches of Asia, silk, spices, and gold. But reaching them was difficult. For centuries, merchants followed overland trade routes like the Silk Road, winding through the Middle East and Central Asia. But when the Ottoman Empire captured Constantinople in 1453, these ancient routes were disrupted. Suddenly, Europe's access to the East was cut off, and a question echoed across the royal courts of Europe. Was there another way to reach Asia? In Portugal, a small kingdom on the edge of the continent, that question became an obsession. Under Prince Henry the Navigator, Portuguese sailors began venturing south along the coast of Africa, mapping uncharted territories and opening new sea routes. They were driven by the promise of trade, the spread of Christianity, and a hunger for glory. Their ships, small caravels with triangular sails, could sail close to the wind and endure long voyages. Step by step, the Portuguese reached further. The Cape Verde Islands, Sierra Leone, and eventually the southern tip of Africa, the Cape of Good Hope, discovered by Bartolomeu Dias in 1488. For the first time, Europe glimpsed the possibility of a sea route to Asia, but across the border in Spain, another idea was taking shape, one that would change everything. A Genoese sailor named Christopher Columbus believed the world was smaller than it actually was. If he could sail west across the Atlantic, he reasoned, he would reach Asia directly. Most scholars disagreed, believing the journey would be too long and the risks too great. But Columbus was relentless. After years of rejection, he found his patrons in Spain's monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella. They had just completed the Reconquista, the centuries-long war to reclaim Spain from Muslim rule, and were eager for new triumphs to expand their influence and wealth. In 1492, Columbus set sail from Palos de la Frontera with 3 ships, the Niña, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. As the weeks stretched on, his crew grew restless and fearful, convinced they would never find land. But on the morning of October 12, 1492, a cry rang out. Tierra? Land had been sighted. Columbus had reached the Bahamas, though he believed he had found islands off the coast of Asia. He named the people he met Indios, thinking he had reached the Indies. He could not have known he had stumbled upon a vast, unknown continent. Columbus's voyage changed the world overnight. His discovery triggered an age of exploration, conquest, and colonization that would reshape the map and the fate of millions. Spain claimed vast new territories, and Columbus made 3 more voyages, exploring the Caribbean and parts of Central and South America. But his legacy was complex. He opened the door to a new world and to the destruction of old ones. The arrival of Europeans brought disease, enslavement, and conquest to indigenous peoples across the Americas. What Columbus began was not just exploration but empire. Meanwhile, Portugal pressed its own expansion eastward. In 1497, Vasco da Gama sailed around the Cape of Good Hope and reached India, proving a sea route to Asia was possible. The Portuguese soon established trading outposts along Africa, India, and Southeast Asia, seizing control of the lucrative spice trade. Europe's horizons had expanded beyond imagination, and the world was suddenly connected by sea. But as Spain and Portugal divided the new world between them, competition intensified. The Treaty of Tordesillas, signed in 1494, split the world along an invisible line. Lands to the west would belong to Spain, those to the east to Portugal. It was an agreement that would shape global empires for centuries. The early 16th century was an age of ambition. The world had suddenly grown larger, yet the boundaries of the known world were still uncertain. While Columbus had revealed the Americas to Europe, no one yet knew how far they stretched, or whether a western route to Asia truly existed. To the east, the Portuguese now dominated the trade routes around Africa, filling their ships with spices, gold, and silk. Spain, eager to match their rivals' power, needed a bold new venture, and one man would give them just that: Ferdinand Magellan. Magellan was born in Portugal around 1480, a soldier and sailor in the service of the Portuguese crown. He had fought in the east, in India and the Malay archipelago, where the Portuguese had carved out their empire. There he heard stories of the fabled Spice Islands, the Moluccas, rich with nutmeg and cloves worth their weight in gold. But Magellan's fortunes in Portugal soured. Denied promotion and dismissed by his king, he turned instead to Spain, offering his loyalty and his daring plan. Magellan believed he could reach the Spice Islands by sailing west, around the tip of the new continent discovered by Columbus. The idea was audacious, the seas were uncharted, and the size of the Pacific was unknown. But for King Charles I of Spain, soon to become Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, it was an opportunity to outflank Portugal and claim the riches of the East. Magellan was given 5 ships: the Trinidad, San Antonio, Concepcion, Victoria, and Santiago. In September 1519, he set sail from Seville with about 270 men, a mix of Spaniards, Portuguese, Italians, and others. Their journey would become one of the greatest adventures and ordeals in human history. From the start, tensions plagued the expedition. Many of Magellan's crew distrusted him for being Portuguese. The voyage down the coast of South America was grueling, with storms, starvation, and mutiny threatening to tear the fleet apart. At one point, Magellan had to execute or maroon rebellious officers to maintain control. But he pressed on, driven by unbreakable determination. In October 1520, after months of searching, the fleet found a narrow, twisting passage through the southern tip of the continent. The men called it the Strait of Magellan. For weeks they struggled through its treacherous waters, battered by gales and freezing rain. When they finally emerged into the open ocean, Magellan wept with relief. Before them stretched an expanse of calm, shimmering water. Believing it to be peaceful, he named it the Mar Pacifico, the Pacific Ocean. But the Pacific was far larger than anyone imagined. For nearly 4 months, Magellan's fleet sailed across it without sight of land. Supplies ran out. The men ate rats, sawdust, and even leather to survive. Scurvy ravaged the crew. When they finally reached the islands of Guam and the Philippines, they were half dead with hunger. Yet they had crossed the greatest ocean on Earth, the first Europeans to do so. In the Philippines, Magellan sought to convert local rulers to Christianity, hoping to secure Spanish influence. But his ambitions proved fatal. In April 1521, during a skirmish on the island of Mactan, he was killed in battle. Struck down by spears and swords, the man who had sailed further than any before him died far from home, never to see his achievement completed. The remnants of his fleet pressed on under the command of Juan Sebastián Elcano. They reached the Spice Islands, loaded their ships with valuable cargo, and set course for Spain. Only one ship, the Victoria, made it back, a battered ghost of a vessel, arriving in 1522 with just 18 survivors. But their return proved what no one had known for sure. The Earth was round, and it could be circumnavigated by sea. The voyage of Magellan and Elcano had connected the world in a single continuous loop. The implications were enormous. For the first time, humanity had seen the planet as one. Oceans that once divided continents were now highways of trade and empire. The age of discovery had truly gone global. Spain, enriched by its conquests in the Americas, rose to become a superpower. The gold and silver flowing from the New World transformed its fortunes and its ambitions. Portuguese fleets continued to dominate the Indian Ocean, establishing a network of fortified trading posts from Mozambique to Goa to Malacca. Meanwhile, Spanish galleons crossed the Pacific, linking Manila and Acapulco in a web of commerce that spanned the globe. The 16th century had become the first era of global connection and global competition. But this newfound expansion came at a cost. Indigenous civilizations across the Americas faced invasion, enslavement, and disease. The empires of the Aztecs and Incas fell under Spanish conquest. Their cities razed, their treasures looted. The Columbian Exchange, the vast transfer of plants, animals, people, and ideas between the old and new worlds, reshaped life on both sides of the Atlantic. Crops like potatoes, maize, and tomatoes crossed to Europe, while horses, cattle, and wheat spread to the Americas. Yet along with them came devastating epidemics that decimated native populations. The Age of Discovery was an age of both creation and destruction, of daring voyages that expanded humanity's horizons and empires that exploited them. It was an age of genius, courage, and greed. By the mid-1500s, the map of the world had been redrawn. Every ocean now bore the wake of European ships. The Portuguese controlled the east, the Spanish the west, and new powers like England and France watched enviously, preparing to challenge them. The race for empire and for the soul of the new world had only just begun. By the middle of the 16th century, the known world had been transformed. The voyages of Columbus and Magellan had revealed new continents and connected distant oceans. Spain and Portugal now ruled empires that stretched across the seas, their flags flying on every horizon. But their dominance would not last forever. The Age of Discovery was entering a new phase, one defined by rivalry, innovation, and the rise of new powers. England, France, and the Netherlands. Spain and Portugal's early success had been built on monopoly, protected trade routes, papal decrees, and royal charters that divided the world between them. But as wealth poured into Iberia, other nations looked on with envy. The riches of the Indies, the gold of the Americas, and the spices of the East were too tempting to ignore. In northern Europe, ambitious merchants and adventurers prepared to challenge the Spanish and Portuguese empires on the high seas. The first to rise were the English. Under Queen Elizabeth I, England emerged from isolation and civil strife to become a maritime nation. Its sailors, like John Hawkins and Francis Drake, combined exploration with privateering, attacking Spanish treasure ships and seizing their cargo. Drake, in particular, became a legend. In 1577, he set out on a daring voyage to circumnavigate the globe, striking Spanish settlements along the Pacific coast of the Americas before crossing the vast Pacific and returning to England in triumph. His journey, like Magellan's before him, proved that English seamanship could rival any in the world. The English weren't alone. The French, too, sought their share of the New World. Explorers like Jacques Cartier sailed up the St. Lawrence River in search of a passage to Asia, laying the foundations for what would become New France. The Dutch, newly independent from Spanish rule, soon followed. With their fast ships and disciplined crews, they became masters of trade. In 1602, they established the Dutch East India Company, one of the first multinational corporations, to control the spice trade in Asia. It was a new model of empire, driven not by kings, but by commerce. As these northern powers expanded, the old world order began to fracture. The Treaty of Tordesillas, which had once neatly divided the globe, meant little now. English and Dutch ships sailed wherever profit could be found. They raided, traded, and established colonies from the Caribbean to Indonesia. In the process, they transformed exploration into a global system of trade and conquest. Meanwhile, the Spanish Empire reached its zenith. In the Americas, conquistadors like Hernán Cortés and Francisco Pizarro had already destroyed the great indigenous empires of the Aztecs and Incas. The wealth of these civilizations poured into Spain, silver from the mines of Potosí, gold from Mexico, and sugar from the Caribbean. Spanish galleons carried this treasure across the Atlantic to Seville and across the Pacific to Manila. linking the Americas and Asia in a single imperial network. But wealth on such a scale came with consequences. The flood of silver caused inflation across Europe, destabilizing economies and fueling war. Spain's vast empire became increasingly difficult to manage. Its power rested on fragile supply lines and the exploitation of native and enslaved labor. The very success of the Spanish Empire contained the seeds of its decline. Portugal too began to falter. Its colonies stretched from Brazil to India, but its population was small and its rivals many. In 1580, after a dynastic crisis, Portugal fell under Spanish rule, merging its empire with Spain's for 60 years. During that time, Dutch and English traders seized Portuguese outposts in Asia and the Atlantic, undermining their dominance. The Iberian monopoly on exploration was broken forever. As the 17th century dawned, a new global order was taking shape. The Dutch East India Company established its capital at Batavia, modern-day Jakarta, and began to dominate the spice trade, ousting the Portuguese from their Asian strongholds. The English founded their own East India Company and set their sights on India. In North America, both England and France began colonizing the vast, unclaimed lands discovered decades earlier. Jamestown, founded in 1607, became England's first permanent settlement in the New World. The seas were now highways of empire. Ships carried not only goods, but ideas, technologies, and cultures across continents. Yet with this connection came exploitation. The transatlantic slave trade grew into a vast and brutal enterprise, as millions of Africans were captured and transported to work on plantations in the Americas. The same ocean routes that carried explorers and merchants also carried unimaginable suffering. By the mid-1600s, Europe's reach encircled the globe. The dream that had begun with Columbus, to link east and west through exploration, had become a reality, though at a terrible cost. The Age of Discovery had created a new world, but it had also created new empires, new hierarchies, and new conflicts that would shape centuries to come. In just over 100 years, humanity's understanding of the world had transformed completely. Maps that once ended in sea monsters and myth were now filled with coastlines, islands, and continents. The compass, the astrolabe, and the caravel had given rise to a new science of navigation. Knowledge, like trade, had become global, and yet behind every voyage lay the same human motives that had driven Genghis Khan across the steppe or Alexander the Great across Asia. Ambition, glory, and the hunger to leave a mark on history. The Age of Discovery was both a triumph of the human spirit and a testament to its capacity for conquest. By the dawn of the 18th century, the great age of exploration was ending. The world had been mapped, its oceans crossed, its continents claimed. The adventure that began with Columbus and Magellan had given birth to an interconnected world, one of empires, commerce, and competition. A world that would soon be transformed again by revolutions of industry, science, and politics. But the spirit of discovery endured. It lived on in the curiosity that sent telescopes to the stars, submarines to the ocean depths, and humans to the farthest frontiers of the unknown. The explorers of the 15th and 16th centuries had set humanity on a path that would lead not only across the world, but beyond it. Thank you for watching History Recapped. If you enjoyed this documentary on the Age of Discovery, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the moments that change the world. This has been History Recapped, where we bring the past back to life one story at a time.